All right, let's get into this program. We've got living on the edge. We're talking about edge restraints. There's all kinds of edge restraints, but let's get into really why we use them in the first place, Mike.
Well, the whole idea is to keep your project intact,
Yeah.
right? Edge restraints are a vital part of our project, but they're not really that glamorous. And in fact, usually if they're done right, you never see them.
You're right. And I go into my shop, I got a few drills and some tools. What the heck do you have here?
Well, when you have a driveway, when you have any paver project, it's
Yeah.
always subject to lateral forces. And
Of
those
course.
lateral forces cause paver creep.
Yeah.
Edge restraint, the friction of that setting bed material, they're designed to help resist that edging creep.
Okay. And I'm guessing somehow you're going to show us what we're talking about with edging creep.
Right. I'm going to show you what happens if, hey, maybe our edge restraint isn't sufficient.
Yeah.
So we've got a little hydraulic press rigged up. We have our paver patio or driveway laid out here. So
Okay.
let's give it a few shots and start seeing what happens.
Yeah, this is
so
great.
As we pump this and we give it a little bit of force, every time that car turns into the driveway, every
Yep.
time that lateral force hits, those pavers are moving, right? If we don't have proper edge restraint, those pavers can move out of position. They separate, they start to lose interlock,
Right.
the joint material fails, and your whole job is on the way to failure.
And we've seen that time and time again. People come out, hey, your sand failed, your pavers failed, all these different alleged failures. They're all driven by that edge restraint, aren't they?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to think about, right?
Yeah.
It's an afterthought on most jobs.
Yeah.
We're finishing things off, we're rushing to get done, and maybe we're not paying enough attention to that edge restraint and making sure that that's going to provide the best possible support to make that project last forever.
Right. And then you just get domino effect. The whole paving system fails once you get a little failure on that edge restraint.
Right. A lot easier to take a few minutes, a little bit of time and money to install a great edge restraint when you're finishing a project, than come back and fix it after the fact.
Right. So let's get into the types of edge restraints that we have. There's a lot of options here that we can do, and we can talk about those different edge restraints that are available, but we've got some different applications here. We're going to introduce traditional. We're going to talk about permeable options. We're going to talk about Gator base, and we're going to even do an overlay when we get through this program. So, but before we get into all that stuff, we really want to talk about having the right base material, right?
Right. Before you even get to the edge restraint, you're excavating your project. You're compacting your native soils. You're putting in a base for foundation for your project, right?
It's critical. You got to have the right
At least
base.
hopefully you are.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you don't extend that base past the edge of your project, you're setting that edge up for failure no matter what kind of edge restraint you use.
And let's pull up an image here. We've got a picture here of what that looks like if you don't extend your base past the formula, and what that does to your paving stones. You get that complete failure. Those start fading away, and that's what we're talking about, Mike. With that domino effect, it's really going to weaken the whole system. You've got those pavers failing on the edge, and eventually that's going to migrate into the field. So how do we correct that?
Well, we've all seen that 100 times. Anyone that installs pavers, anyone that looks at pavers frequently, we've seen that edge roll on driveways, on patios. It's unsightly, and then everything else behind it starts to shift and fail. So we need to make sure that our edge extends at least 6 inches past the edge of our project on a pedestrian project, and 12 inches past the edge for a vehicular application.
Right. And we showed a couple of different applications briefly there. We're going to talk about each of those cross section, because it doesn't matter whether you're using Gator base or whether you're using a traditional, or even whether you're using those hybrid bases
with the open graded stone.
You've got to get that base material well past, minimum of 6 inches past the paving stone surface, or you're going to have failure like we just saw.
Right. It's real easy to, hey, I didn't excavate quite far enough, or I'm not compacting out to the very edge, and you leave yourself with substandard foundation support for that edge restraint. That's what we're going to show with these demos right here.
All right. So over here, we've got what you're showing is, I'm assuming, just sort of a natural earth, soil, uncompacted.
Right. So this foam right here is simulating soil, right? The soil that's on all our job sites. And it might feel relatively firm underfoot as you're walking on it, but it's not going to support the edge of a hardscape project long term, especially if it's a driveway with loads, right?
Makes a lot of sense.
So if we stopped our edge restraint too soon, our base prep too soon, we put our paver right on the edge of this and it's soil, It's soft, it's spongy.
Yeah.
It's going to compress, it's going to roll over time. Our edge has nothing firm to rest on. So that's setting that project up for failure right there.
Completely. You get that roll and then bang, that domino effect occurs and it ruins the whole paving stone project.
Right. If we have our crushed stone extended at least 6 inches past the edge of our project, that crushed stone is a nice, solid, firm foundation for the edge of our pavers, for the edge itself, and that's going to provide a long-lasting foundation. So you can see here, we can't make this roll. It's solid, right?
Yep.
That's a nice, solid foundation. But if you don't extend your edge far enough, if you're right on the edge, well,
make a
you
mess.
can have some movement. You can have that sliding or rolling effect occur.
Yeah.
All you have is loose soil holding that in, the mulch bed. That's not a great way to do a patio, right?
No, not at all. So obviously, before you get into the edge restraint, what we want to do, refresher, we see it time and time again. That base does not extend out 6 inches minimally past what your finished paving stone surface would look like. So extend that base, use the right materials, and help ensure that that edge restraint is going to last before you even put it in. So we talked about the base material. What about edge restraints? Let's talk about those now.
Well, there's so many different ways that you can do edge restraint for a project. And the first one we'll talk about is the idea of poured concrete.
Okay.
It's really the ultimate edge restraint. It's never going to go anywhere, right?
Right.
It's usually 18 inches deep, well embedded in the soils there, thick, 6-8 inches wide, often reinforced with rebar. But that's not seen on residential projects.
Well, let's take a look at what we're really talking about here. This is some crazy stuff here. This is a monster job. We're talking commercial project here. This is, like you're saying, Mike, this is 18 inches poured concrete, really probably used in commercial projects only, not something you're going to do in a backyard, is it?
No, I really don't think that you would see this happen in a backyard setting. One, it's not cost effective, and two, it's not really that aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
Most people want to see pavers and that paver patio and the beauty of a concrete paver rather than poured concrete.
Absolutely. You're not laying pavers to see 18-inch border course of poured concrete.
Right.
So good. So we got a couple other options. So that's really the beast of edge restraint. That's what's going to really be the most industrial. But let's get into your backyard.
Here's the next beast of edge restraint.
This is not something I'm going to use, but another option, right?
Right. So precast concrete. Whether it's, the 36 or 48 inch long, large precast units or individual curbstone units or even a cobblestone type material.
Yeah, these provide great strength, better aesthetics because you got natural, you've got, concrete cast units like this.
Match or, do complementary colors to your project. So visually much more appealing.
Yep.
Some people like the look. Some people just want their paver field to end with the turf though,
and put in a border. Sure.
So if you're going to do precast curbing units, they can't just go in the dirt on the edge of your project, George.
No, and we get that roll and unsightly domino effect again.
You get, your block leaning, and then the water gets in, and then everything starts to migrate.
Right.
So when you install precast curbing units, they need to be bedded in mortar or have mortar that's, angled up at the backside to support that. Mortared in place somehow fixed to prevent lateral movement.
Right. So while they're beautiful, they do require a little bit of that mortar bed that Mike's talking about, mortar backing, because as big as this unit is, it still has a little bit of instability unless it's locked in with some sort of concrete or mortar.
Right. Think about the forces that are play here. Gravity is, going to cause pavers to creep on any kind of slope.
Yep.
The soft soils can become even softer when they get wet. So while it might look good the day you install it, if you don't bed these in mortar, back them up with mortar or concrete, they're going to move over time.
And a lot of people think, boy, that's a beefy unit. I can avoid edge restraint. That's really a terrible mistake too.
Yep. You're asking for a problem down the road there.
Yeah.
The other issue that we see over and over and over again is asphalt used as an edge restraint.
Yeah, a lot of times we see that. I'm going to cut the asphalt. I'll butt my pavers up next to the asphalt. That'll serve as my edge restraint.
Yeah, that road's not moving. That's sitting there, right?
Right.
It's solid.
Until Mother Nature gets its turn with it.
Yeah, and when it gets hot, asphalt softens up. Asphalt's not a rigid material. Asphalt's
flexible,
fluid material, basically, flexible. So asphalt does not count as a rigid edge restraint.
Right. So
If you're doing that driveway,
yeah, we got a great picture of a driveway, which we see time and time again here, where the pavers are cut into the asphalt. And you'll see that in the photo that we'll pull up here. A lot of times people expect that asphalt to serve as the edge restraint. But Mike, like you're talking, asphalt heats up or it freeze thaws and creates
it's
movement.
soft enough to allow some deformation. Those pavers start to creep, and you wish that you poured a concrete curb in that application, right?
Right. So we'll get that image up to you in a bit here. But moving forward, so those are some of the options. Asphalt not being a great option, one that we don't recommend being used. The other option now is we get into some metal, aluminum being probably the most popular.
Yeah, steel rusts.
Yep.
So steel's not a very popular edge restraint option for hardscape projects, but
Sure.
Aluminum certainly is. You know, it's durable, it's long lasting. You can bend it to a certain degree.
Right.
So we have a piece of aluminum edge there. You mind grabbing that for me?
Of course.
All right. So aluminum edge. Everything's getting a little bit expensive these days, right?
Metal, of course, is one of the leading inflationary products.
So metal is one of the worst offenders these days, but it's still available. And like we said, it's strong. It lasts a long time. It works pretty well for a hardscape application.
Pretty well, but I think not as well as plastic in our opinion. A little tough to flex this. I mean, I think the plastic, which we'll get to in a bit, has a little more flexibility for working radiuses and such.
You can do a smoother curve for sure. So aluminum tends to kink.
Yep.
And unfortunately, we don't do kinked edges on our patios. We do nice radius curves, right?
Yeah.
So that plastic lends itself to hitting those radius curves a little bit better. And the way that aluminum edging is made is a little bit different than at least the Alliance rigid edge.
Yep.
This is extruded rather than injection molded. And we'll talk about the differences a little bit more with our plastic edge, but that means that there's no support. There's no brackets that actually will support this from folding.
And over time, we showed you with that lateral movement, it is very susceptible to movement. So you want an edge restraint that's got the strength to keep the pavers in place. Otherwise, you get that failure that we keep showing them.
Right. So we might bring this back up again later, but let's move into our plastic edge. So what kind of plastic edge does Alliance offer, George?
We've got 3 different types, and we'll show you what those look like here. We've got 3 different types of plastic edge restraint. On the left-hand side there, that's our tile edge. So that edge restraint is designed for tile. Typical porcelain tile that we're seeing in backyard applications these days is 3/4 inch. So that has a nice low profile. It sits underneath a 3/4 inch tile or a 2 cm tile beautifully. The center image there you see, that's our Mini Pro. That works great for natural stone, and that is an inch high, so it's perfect for natural stone. Inch and as you see there, 1.5 inch bluestone, keeps underneath the surface, looks great. And then on the far right, you see our our rigid edge restraint. So that's going to be our strongest plastic edge restraint, and that's going to sit even higher, but yet still sits below a 60 mil paver. So those are the 3 options. But Mike, there's a difference there. I can see it in front of me. That one on the far right, our rigid edge, has a lot more strength and girth to it. And I think it's due to the manufacturing process.
Right. So if we come to the GoPro, let's see if we can get a nice close-up shot here. I've got a little child-oriented demo
Learning
here.
time is playtime, right?
Well, hopefully Clara doesn't find out I stole her Play-Doh
and
stuff. So when you manufacture plastic edging, there's 2 different ways to go about it.
All right.
And the first way you can go about it is through the extrusion process. So basically what that means is that a ribbon of plastic is pushed out of a machine, kind of like a long piece of spaghetti.
Yeah.
And every 8 feet, it gets cut off.
Okay.
And then we push out more, right? So that's a very, very efficient manufacturing process. It goes very quickly. You get a lot of edge very fast out of your machinery.
Yep.
Unfortunately, what that means is that you don't have a 3-dimensional structure.
Right. So each of those are really just 2-dimensional, or it's kind of an L shape.
Correct. So you get that L shape like a piece of angle iron, and you lack that support,
Right.
that buttressing effect that really keeps that vertical edge vertical and transfers the load directly to the spikes.
Right. And that buttress really is important, especially when you're talking about a 2 3/8 or maybe even an 80 mil paver.
Yep. So let's take a look at the other way that you make edging, which is injection molding.
Okay.
So instead of it pushing out a long string that's cut off every 8 feet, we actually have to push the plastic into molds in a cavity. So you can see that it's obviously more difficult to do this and takes more time to fill up all the molds in this all the cavities in that big mold, and then pull the pieces out and have our sticks of edging, right?
Absolutely. And of course, in the real manufacturing process, we're not dealing with Play-Doh. We're dealing with a liquid plastic that gets poured into there. So that allows us to have, I'll call it that three-dimensional shape that you just talked about.
Right. So we will bring this over in front of the camera there, and you can see that instead of it just being an L shape, we have these brackets, and these angled brackets will transfer the load from this vertical leg down to the horizontal leg and right to that spike that's embedded in that compacted base material. So it helps prevent that L-shaped edge from folding over, and it helps transfer that load directly to the spike where it can be absorbed and prevent any movement from occurring.
Yeah. And speaking of spikes, a lot of options on spikes. So when we're using a plastic edge restraint, we're talking about using the plastic edge restraint in concert with a spike in most cases, aren't we?
Correct. Unless we're talking about Gator base, you're probably using some kind of a spike.
Okay.
Now, what kind of a spike are we going to use? That's the matter for debate today.
Yes. Well, for us at Alliance, there really is no debate. The first thing you're going to use is a non-galvanized spike.
Well, these galvanized spikes are so nice and shiny, George.
Yeah, we hear that.
And they're not going to rust.
We hear that all the time. Oftentimes when you're doing building construction, you don't want rust. This is one case where you do.
Right. When those spikes go into the ground and rust, they expand.
Yeah.
They get very rough textured. They actually bond with the soils and the sand and the stone underneath there. So a rusted spike is going to hold much better. It's going to resist pulling out in the freeze-thaw cycles. Definitely the way to go, contrary to some misconceptions out there.
Yeah. So use a non-galvanized spike to start with. And then once you get past that, there's a couple options. There's the length of the spike, and then there's the style of the spike. Walk us through those different types.
Well, you commonly see the 8, 10, and 12-inch spike in the hardscape world, right? I'd say that's probably what's most commonly available, and the 10 and 12 is really where you want to be.
Okay.
10-inch spike or 12-inch spike. 10 certainly sufficient for a pedestrian application. 12 is good for vehicular applications, but stick with that longer spike. Make sure it's going to go down deep into that base material, rust into the soils and the base material, and provide long-lasting support for your edge.
We often get the question of, do I need that 12-inch spike? In some cases, you don't need a 12-inch spike, right?
Yeah, if you're doing a walkway and you only have 6 inches of base, 12-inch spike's really not necessary.
Yeah, it's a lot of extra steel that you're paying for that you just don't need. So stick with non-galvanized and then gauge whether you need a 10 or 12. Really, I think a general rule of thumb is driveway, go to a 12. If you're pedestrian, a 10 is going to be fine.
Yep, that certainly works. But we also have the dilemma of a regular straight common nail or a spiral nail. So what are you thinking there, George? I
don't know. This one always confused me because I can see the advantage of that spiral, kind of like a drill or a spiral football. It's going to have a nice trajectory into the soil. So I think a lot of guys like it for that reason.
I think that might be in your head. I don't know. I've never really seen a huge difference. Some guys think that spiral spike goes in easier, but as long as they're both non-galvanized, they're going to rust and hold very well. So choose your best spike, whatever you want to go with, spiral or common, not a problem.
Yep. So, and then there's some other factors going in with spikes that we'll talk about too, and that's with permeable base options or with that open graded base option.
Well, open graded base is becoming much more popular, and there are certainly permeable jobs out there.
Yep.
You cannot use a spike in clean stone, which is what a hybrid base or a permeable job calls for.
I don't know about that. I would argue you can use it, but maybe it's not the best idea.
Well, I did a little bit of welding the other day, attached some hooks to the spikes.
Of course you did.
And tested some pull out.
Yeah.
So we actually are going to show you how easy it is to pull a spike straight out of clean stone and how much harder it is to pull that spike out of well-compacted, modified 0 3/4 stone. So let's take a look. So you can see that didn't take any effort. That spike pulled right out of that clean stone.
Yep.
And now with our modified, what are we going to hit? A lot more difficult. So
yeah, 0.72, you're at 17. Wow.
Yeah, so I don't know what, almost 20 times harder to pull that spike out of the modified, and that was a goofy little bucket that wasn't well compacted.
Right. So when you go into those open graded bases, you certainly don't want to use a spike. We've got an option that we're going to talk about shortly with that. But there's some other base applications that we want to talk about.
Well, we sell quite a lot of Gator base these days, George.
We sure do.
Gator base has an excellent edge restraint system.
Yes, and that is a very shameless plug for our upcoming show next week on Gator base. So what we're going to do here is we're going to quickly plug that and show you that, and then we're going to come back to our man Lou, and he's going to show you how you would install plastic edge restraint with Gator base. But first, let's take a quick shot at Gator base.
That Gator base video always pumps me up. Hey, what's up, Gator Nation? I'm Lou. I'm the rep here in New Jersey, and I'm going to show you how to attach our rigid plastic edge to our Gator base system using our Gator screws. So I'm just going to shift over a little bit, and Dave will take a quick close shot on this. First thing you want to do is you're going to put these in every other hole. And so we'll place 2 of these in right now. There are underneath the flange of the screw is a little spike. You want to tap that in so it's flush and in contact with the plastic edging. Get those in nice and tight. And then you just screw it in simply. And there you have it. So the connection strength between the Gator base, the plastic edging, and our Gator base screw has been tested in labs, and it's been proven to be one of the strongest edge restraint systems, very capable of taking care of those lateral movements that you'll see in your project. So I'm going to kick it back over to Mike and George. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Lou.
Yeah, good strong man showing you a good strong edge restraint. Love to see it. All right. So I think we've got some questions here that are dealing with some frost heave and things like that. So Dave, is there a specific question that we can answer for our audience here?
Yeah, really, it's about, no matter how thick your edging is, it doesn't matter. Edging's still going to be up above your paver surface, no matter if you pull the bedding layer away or not, what spikes you use, it's inevitable. So I think there's a couple solutions you guys can help us with.
Yeah, well, I certainly agree with that. It seems that no matter what you do, plastic edge can move.
Yeah, it has a tendency to do it. That's why it's so important that base material that you that you install, you've got to get it passed. So one of the direct causes of that heave is not extending your base, which we've talked about.
Right. Well, the root cause is moisture, right?
Yeah. Well, true.
So
Before
if
that,
you don't have any moisture, then it's not going to be a problem. But
yeah.
Right. If you don't extend your base far enough, your spikes are not into anything solid.
Right.
They're into loose soil, clay. They're not into anything that holds well, and they're into soils that hold water and expand more. So, of course, they're going to push up.
Right.
So getting a very well compacted base, extending it past your job site, making sure it has the proper pitch to shed water, they're all going to help.
Right.
But in some cases, it's just inevitable. You can't fight Mother Nature and win.
Right. And the other thing that we talked about too that helps is that non-galvanized spike, because if you're using a galvanized spike, you get heavement that draws that nail up. And then when the ground settles, if there's nothing grabbing on, that nail could stay up. But when you get rust and rot around the nail, it tends to move a little better with the earth. Again, it's not going to eliminate it, but it might help a little bit.
Right. So you can certainly improve your chances, but hey, if you want to really improve your chances, you should think about Gator base and those Gator screws that Lou just showed.
Yeah, that's going to eliminate some of the frost heavement because it provides a bit of insulation. And then, of course, that Gator screw locks in the edge restraint. So that's why we feel so strongly about Gator base, because it's a better installation that we feel. So,
right. That mechanical connection of the edge restraint to the Gator base prevents lateral movement, but it also prevents vertical movement.
Yeah.
So that edge cannot move. It's locked in place. The other option you could consider, though, is Extreme Edge.
Extreme Edge is our new product, and there are others out there in the market. There's a growing trend for these concrete edge restraints, but they're more than just concrete. They're fiber reinforced, Mike. So what's that all about?
Polymer modified fiber reinforced concrete. So Extreme Edge isn't your typical bag of concrete. It's extremely strong, hence the name, right? It's polymer modified. That makes it nice and creamy, gives it a little bit of flexibility. It's fiber reinforced, and it's not fiber reinforced with single monofilament fibers. It actually has multi-filaments, fibrillated strands that expand as you mix it up. Do we have that picture?
Yeah, we got a great picture that'll show you what this looks like. It shows a quarter. We're going to talk about these different applications of where we can use Extreme Edge here, but it can be used, as we discussed before, traditional bases. It can be used for permeable bases. It can be used for Gator base and overlay applications like we've talked about. So
it's really the only completely multi-purpose edge solution.
Right. And this is what we're talking about, how that product actually looks. There's a couple of quarters there, Canadian quarter for our friends up north, and then we've got a U.S. quarter, both same size, but that gives you the scale of what we're looking at.
Right. So you can see the aggregate small.
Yeah.
But it's angular granite aggregate. Very, very strong. Makes it very easy to mix as well because of that small size. And then those fibers that you see expand into a 3D latticework structure as you mix it. So the entire length of Extreme Edge, top to bottom, left to right, is reinforced with fiber, not just a single point.
Right. And that fiber is really important because really there's two types of concrete out there. There's cracked and there's gonna crack. So what do those fibers do in the case that you might see some cracking?
Well, they help to lower the potential for cracks and then minimize the expansion of cracks.
Right.
And there's a pretty funny video of us dropping this stuff from 45 feet, proving how tough it is and preventing cracks with that fiber.
Right. So let's take a look at that video, then we'll come back and explain it a little bit more.
So we're out here testing our Extreme Edge against regular concrete. Our Extreme Edge is twice the strength as regular concrete, but there's only one way to test it, from an extreme height. So we got my man Doug up there. What do you got there, Doug?
40-pound brick of concrete that I'm going to drop from 45 feet in the sky. 3, 2, 1.
So that regular block of concrete just cracked in half. Let's see how Extreme Edge does.
40-pound brick of Extreme Edge. 3, 2, 1.
Holy sh! See what happened here. Concrete, Extreme Edge, twice as strong.
So pretty tough stuff.
Really tough stuff. That's a great test. You know, we got a great R&D lab up in Montreal, but there's really no better test than throwing something off a boom lift, Mike.
So when we first launched Extreme Edge, we met some initial skepticism from some guys that said, hey, I can install plastic edge way faster than concrete edge.
Yeah, and so that's natural, but when you look at the mixing process and installing this process, you get a great installation that can be used in multiple applications, unlike plastic edge restraint. And you'll see with Extreme Edge and the way we built it with polymodified fiber reinforced, the workability of this stuff is incredible.
Right. I've seen guys lay down concrete edge faster than plastic edge, I think.
I think so too. And you look at the various price points on a product like this, it's very competitive now, even despite the labor that you need to install it.
Yep.
So let's take a look at this. Should we do some installation here?
I think we should. You have some Extreme Edge mixed up, I
Yeah,
think?
we got some mixed up.
All
Thanks
right, we got
to
Extreme
our
Edge, we got
team here.
plastic edge. So let's take this GoPro shot of our little patio edge here. So you can see we have crushed compacted stone, a sand setting bed, and I think I'm going to put some of our plastic edge on this project, George.
Let's get after it, but not so fast, Mike.
What do you mean? What's the matter?
You're making the number one mistake we see in installing edge restraint, which is not getting that sand setting bed out of the way.
Right. If I don't take that sand setting bed away, I'm putting my edge restraint down on unstable material.
Yeah, sand is not, it's a great material for bedding layer, but it's not the best material to install. It's not really a base material. And here in this case, you're trying to use it as a base foundation for that first segment of the install.
Right. So over time, well, first of all, when you nail that spike in, you're going to have the tendency to roll that edge and create a gap along your pavers and the edge restraint, because that sand will deform.
Yeah.
Over time, that sand washes out. All of a sudden, your edge is kind of suspended in midair.
Yeah. And then that really is what we talked about, that susceptibility to freeze thaw. So get that bedding layer out of the way, whether you're using plastic or whether you're using the Extreme Edge, which we're going to show you here next. So, Mike, you're moving that sand out of the way. Anything else we need to consider with that?
Well, we always want to move the bedding material out, whether it's chip or concrete sand. You always want your edge restraint to rest on firm, compacted base material. That goes for plastic, aluminum, precast concrete, Extreme Edge. They all need a solid foundation. Now, if we are going to use Extreme Edge, the next step will be to pull a little bit of material out from underneath the pavers. So we actually want to create a little bit of void space underneath the pavers.
Yep.
That void space is going to allow us to pack the Extreme Edge underneath the pavers and almost create a footing or a shelf to support that outer edge.
And that shelf is really important, because you're going to, when you do the install, we'll see it more closely, but you're really packing that Extreme Edge underneath there to give it a little more stability, so you don't get any of that rolling that you're talking about.
That's the whole idea. You're creating a footing for that material. So we have some Extreme Edge that we mixed up a little while ago, and it's already starting to stiffen up.
Yep.
That's one of the benefits of Extreme Edge. It is a blend of different cements, including fast setting cement. So in 6 hours or so, this is pretty well set up. Now, there's tons of fiber in here. I know it's a little tough to see on camera, but that fiber is well distributed throughout the entire mix. It's very easy for me to trowel in place. I'm looking to put it about an inch up on that paver.
Right. Okay.
Probably about 4 inches wide,
Sure.
troweled away at about 30 degrees. Very, very easy, very, very clean. You can bury it in the mulch or the soil afterwards, grow grass right up to the edge.
Yeah.
And that fiber and the polymer, plus the strength of the concrete itself, lends itself to a very, very long-lasting edge.
Why don't we get I can really see those fibers here. Let's see if we can get a shot for the GoPro on these fibers, because I think it's really worth noting here, and that helps provide some of the strength. So let's get a shot of that. Yeah, what you can see the fibers, they're extending out. We talked, Mike, about that 3D mesh, so important for the strength of this product.
Really makes a huge difference. Your regular concrete is going to crack, and then there's nothing to stop it from cracking and crumbling further.
Yeah.
Extreme Edge, it's very, very strong to resist the cracking, and as little cracks do occur, that fiber is going to stop them in their tracks.
Makes a lot of sense. So
great for freeze-thaw cycles, right? We talked about the heaving and movement of plastic edge. This is going to deal better with that phenomenon.
Right. And nothing's going to win that argument over time. A lot of these can be susceptible to freeze thaw, but when you have fiber reinforcement, you've got a lot more prevention against that initial cracking. And then if that does crack, you've got a lot more strength to hold it and make sure it doesn't crack further.
Right. So we talked a little bit about the different applications for Extreme Edge, and one of the applications where Extreme Edge really shines is that permeable hybrid chip base.
Yep.
You know, we did talk about the aluminum edge, and there's some options out there. This aluminum edge has a special spike. It's almost like a spade. So you can see that that is certainly different than a nail.
Right.
And that's designed to almost act as a snowshoe or a shovel. And as that goes into that clean stone, it's got larger surface area, prevents lateral movement better.
Yeah,
You
a
know,
little
certainly
better,
a lot
sure.
better.
Better than a spike.
Can still pull out.
Yep.
You know, once it rusts, it might hold a little bit better. You know, not the best option for those hybrid chip or true permeable installs. I don't think there's anything out there better than Extreme Edge, short of a concrete curb.
Yeah, certainly not in our opinion. Now, you've installed this. I can see, did a nice job, nice and smooth. You're saying go up about an inch on the paving stone, general rule of thumb. What about next steps? I know I got to compact the pavers. I want to install some sod or some dirt here. Anything I got to watch out for?
No, you're really ready to go. You know, that sets up very quickly. It's not going to be damaged by the installation of polymeric sand, running a compactor over the edge. You could do that right after installing the edge. You could come back and do it a day later. Not a problem.
Great. So some really cool options here. The last one we want to touch on is the overlay, right?
Right. The idea of concrete overlays is popular in some areas of the country. They even pour slabs just to put pavers on top of them, right?
Right.
In some areas of the country, it's going over existing slabs. You know, it's just more cost effective to utilize a great foundation. So when you have a concrete slab, there are certain considerations, and the biggest consideration is really drainage.
Yeah.
Right. We need to make sure that water doesn't back up, pool, pond on those slabs. So what we have here is a nice core drilled hole that's 2 inches in diameter.
Yeah, you can see these holes are unbelievable. You know, get an idea of the scale. You're pushing that through. So I think that's one point a lot of our folks miss is that drainage hole in the actual overlay.
Right. You need those drainage holes all over the place. Every 3 or 4 feet on center, make sure that water can drain through that concrete slab. But when you think about edge restraint, we need to make sure that water can drain off the edge of that concrete slab just as easily.
Yeah, right. And a lot of times what we see is that edge restraint ends up forming really an edge to your pool to keep all the water inside the overlay, which is terrible.
Right. It's easy to create a dam when you're anchoring that border course or, you know, creating some kind of edge restraint for your overlay job.
Yeah.
Backing up all that water, it never drains out. Causes problems for the pavers, causes problems for the polymeric sand. It's not good all around.
Right.
So what causes a problem and what can be done to fix it?
Well, water is the problem. So how do we fix it?
All right. So let's take a look at that Extreme Edge since we were just doing that. Can I have that bucket back?
Absolutely.
So if we take our Extreme Edge and we're just going to drop it along the edge of the paver here, we are going to create a dam as that concrete adheres to the slab, as the Extreme Edge adheres to the slab and the paver, nothing can get through it. Oftentimes, guys say, hey, I made my weep holes. I shoved my spike through it.
Yeah.
And then that concrete kind of forms back into place and
just
closes
drops
that
it,
hole right
closes
up.
it off, and dirt
You need to make sure that you do something to get a decent hole. And what I have here is a weep straw. It's just a piece of plastic. You can use weep mesh, weep screeds, all different kinds of things. But the idea is that that goes in place and it is embedded in your edge so that there's always a pathway for water to escape and migrate off that concrete slab underneath the paver surface.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. If you're going to go through the effort of doing a weep hole, I would use the right material. Those probably don't cost a lot of money. Use the right material. Make sure you get a long-lasting application.
The other common application of a kind of border course and edge restraint for concrete overlays is gluing that border course directly to the concrete.
Yep. And one great way to do it, shameless plug for our XP glue.
Well, XP glue is the strongest and fastest setting hardscape adhesive on the market. So
of course it is. Also works with fire pits.
Yep. It's good up to 400 degrees. It's perfect for gluing your border course down on a concrete overlay or pool coping application. But what do guys normally do? They take the easy way out, right?
Well, let's get at it.
What's the easiest way to do a
easiest way?
Border.
Nice line here. Put a lot of glue in there because we don't want that moving.
So if we do a line parallel to our border course and we stick our pavers down in it, we've created a dam that backs up all the water and doesn't allow it to flow out.
Right.
What we need to do is multiple lines of glue perpendicular to that border course. And we'll see if George can make a few lines for us here.
Yeah.
And that's going to leave us pathways for the water to flow out. So it takes a little bit more time than a couple continuous beads, but it allows that water a pathway to escape from underneath the patio.
Right. So we've installed that paver on the border course. We can get a nice adhesion, and we've got evacuation of the water so we don't create that pool or that bathtub in there.
Right. So make sure those lines are perpendicular, not parallel, and you'll have a well-adhered border
Yep.
that still allows that moisture to pass through. It'll help the polymeric sand. It'll help the pavers. You'll have a nice long-lasting project.
Great. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the importance of extending that base material past the edge of your pavers, minimum 6 inches.
Right. 12 for a driveway.
Yeah, safe bet. And then we talked about all the different edge restraint options out there. We covered a lot of things from, the old port in place, commercial, industrial, to the different plastic edge restraints and into extreme edge. So really, any particular product of choice that you would recommend?
Well, in the end, you just need to make sure that you install edge restraint properly.
Right.
No matter which product you're using, if it's done wrong, it's not going to work.
Yeah. So the importance of this reel here is not to pitch any one product over another, but of course, installation, do it right. Don't live on the edge. Do the products right, install them right, and you'll have a better hardscape project in the end.
Yep.
So,
And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about Gator base and potentially eliminating some of those freeze-thaw cycles in the wintertime, not seeing that plastic edge heave up, next Tuesday at 1 o'clock, we are doing a show on Gator base. So we'll teach you the ins and outs on saving some time with Gator base.
Yep.
And it definitely does help out with those freeze-thaw cycles.
great. And so what we want to do here, again, thank you so much for spending time with us. We hope you learned a little bit. If you do want to tune in to Gator Base next week or watch any of these educational programs or download any guides, check it out at alliancegator.com/education.